Immediate what?
Immediate.
Roll call.
Ms. Mucko?
Here.
Mr. Olson?
Here.
Mr. Walker? Mr. Clock?
Here.
Mr. Erkins?
Here.
Jim did tell me that he wasn't able to make it today, so I'll follow up with him afterwards. As Chase mentioned, I will never ask you to go buy me gift cards to Apple or iTunes or anything like that. So I know it sounds like I've been busy spamming people, but I know that I talked to Tony and it's just somebody's using my name and it's a weird email address.
It's happening to everybody, so don't,
Please don't ever go buy gift cards for me. The investment management services RFP is live on the website. So under the RFQ section, so if there's anybody that you wanted to forward that to, the deadline is July 20. July 20, I know you mentioned that you maybe had a contact that you would want to send that RFP to.
Clearwater Advisors right there.
But it is live. I've posted it on my GBAD Facebook page to try to get out there. I know you guys have posted it. So just if there's anybody that you think would be a good fit, send it to them. July 20 deadline. All right. With that, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the May 16th meeting.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. I'll remember to send them around this time. And Marie, monthly activity and financial report.
thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. For the fourth year in a row, Boise Center was elected as best conference center by Sport Meetings. So that's always fun when we get those kind of recognitions.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, are we #1 in the world or in Treasure Valley or in Idaho or?
This is national. Go ahead, MM.
Madam Chairman and members of the board. So this is a Reader's Choice Award by Smart Meetings Publishes a meetings industry publication. And they have probably 20 different categories, and Boise Center was nominated in the best conference center category. And they select the top 4, I think. So we were voted one of the top 4. It doesn't officially become public until July 1st, but this is our 4th year that we have been in this award category and have consistently won. So for us, it's a great kudos, it's a great marketing PR effort. We put the logo on our website, we use it in sales materials. We get to say we're an award-winning convention center. So that helps. So not locally, no, it's a national meetings publication and reinforces our reputation.
Thank you.
So construction on the aquatics facility is going well. I forwarded out a couple of pictures that I took when I was out on site a week and a half ago with Ryan. To get the chance, kind of fun to go out and see things going up and construction going on. The ceiling in Boise Center West will have work done the last 2 weeks of August. Cody alluded to that during his presentation. He also mentioned that July is back-to-back conventions. So each week we have a convention through July. Should be another record month for us. We've talked a little bit, and maybe to Jody's comment during the work session, we are anticipating very high food costs this fall, and availability is going to be challenging. I talked a little bit about this at the last board meeting, that several articles that I read, including the Kipling report and others, that show farm production to be down this summer because of yield, costs of fuel, costs of fertilizer, all influencing that. The bird flu wiping out millions of chickens and turkeys, and so they're going to have to rebuild the flocks. So imports from South America to Central America, where we get a lot of the fruit products, grapes and other fruit products. So again, Cody brought this up during his presentation that proposal has been made internally to go to a 30-day pricing for our menus. So the fall is very unpredictable at this point. So we're doing what we can to protect the pricing, but we'll see how it goes. Flip side, room tax receipts from across the state according to the Department of Commerce. Across the state breaking records. Again, Eastern Idaho, Northern Idaho, again, particularly for the summer. It's going to be interesting to see the closing Yellowstone Park and the effect that that has on Eastern Idaho. Traditionally, last year, and it was already looking so far year to date, obviously the Pocatello, Idaho Falls corridor going to Yellowstone Park is huge, and going up through Coeur d'Alene, North Idaho, and the glacier area. So it's going to be an interesting, I haven't talked to anybody at Commerce yet, but I think generally speaking, it's going to be interesting to watch the dynamic. And if Eastern Idaho continues to be strong, obviously, Joni and I were talking about this before the board meeting, that, you know, hotel room availability and cost in Eastern Idaho is exorbitant. It's higher than I've ever seen it, for sure. See if that changes at all. See if people end up going to Tetons, or if they continue, rather than going to Yellowstone, kick up to Glacier. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the impact of the closing of Yellowstone has on other regional attractions, the regional being, again, predominantly Glacier, and see if people, you know, change their habit a little, or change their plans. So we'll see how that goes. But pardon me, at least year to date, there continue to be record room tax revenues across the state. The visitor center continues to see quite a few visitors. In fact, there's the one from Germany, and I don't know if it's a couple I ran into or not, but I was out on the plaza one day and people were coming across the plaza and they had a German accent. We're looking for the visitor center. So, but we've had strong visitation so far, and you see more and more of it out there just the last few days when I've been out crossing from west to east or back and forth. People with their cell phones out looking for directions, and I'll stop and ask if I can help get them where they're going. And so anyway, lots of visiting traffic this summer. In fact, yesterday, headed to the gym, I ran into, there were 6 soccer players from Mexico, high school kids, that were on the elevator. And I don't know exactly where from Mexico they were from, but listening to them talk, and one of them had their cell phone out, texting to somebody back home in Mexico. So don't know what tournament it is, but lots of visitors. From a revenue perspective and goals, we're doing very, very well on the financial side. Room tax revenues are up. We're just a few dollars, but we're like $600 or $700 over year to date goal to budget. And again, as the board knows, this was a very aggressive budget year, 8.1 million, and we're ahead of budget. And that being said, with a December that was 250,000 behind. So we're, as Cody alluded to, we've been busy. I do have that additional capital needs of $10,000 in there, and that's over a 2 to 3 year period. Again, just highlighting to the board, as I do every month, that these are projected capital costs that will include ballrooms, the ballroom renovation, some of the ceiling work and that sort of thing. So again, I always like putting it in there to make sure that the public and the board understands that as we look ahead, we have to take care of the assets both east and west. So that's correct. These are in zeros.
Right, I think you said 10,000,
Oh, was it?
I was a little slow, I was a little slow as I was sitting there and I went, oh.
Sorry, 10 million. Yes, it is. It's definitely millions. Yes, thank you.
I was thinking, gee, 10,000, not that much.
Again, we talked about limiting the number of events this fall. Although the fall is already pretty well booked, the few available dates, it could be a lose-lose, depending on how we look at this. If you know, right now, we're protecting those few available dates. They're still available October and November. December, we're managing pretty well. We've already closed out one weekend simply because it's already full with Christmas parties. But, you know, as we get to that 250 range on employees, if we are able to get there before September 1st, that's great, because then we can try to free up those dates. We do have demand in the fall. We've turned away, we've tracked who is called in inquiring on those few available dates. But until we get to September and see what that employee base looks like, we're going to protect those dates. And so when we get to September, and if we hit 250, there's a chance that we won't be able to book those short-term dates. And so the lose is we will have lost revenue on those dates simply because we chose to protect them. Flip side is if we book those dates, we don't have the employees, the reputation and the service level of the center on the line. So it's one of those, again, the analogy that I've used with Cody is it's like navigating a boat in a river that's all full of fog and you don't know where the rocks are. The best you can do is navigate slowly, make the best decisions you can, and at some point, hopefully you don't hit the rocks. So either way, we're surrounded by rocks and trying to navigate through, but those are the decisions that we had to make to protect the staffing levels as well as the reputation. However, with that being said, it still looks like a great year. We still have, like I said, the fall is already looked very, very solid. So, pardon me. The number of conventions at 59, we've got a few on that still are up for contract. The potential is to get as many as 65. You'll see that number later. So we're still looking at a very, very good year from an occupancy and demand standpoint. The attendance numbers, again, very heavily driven by those July conventions and those that are coming up in the fall. Again, Cody alluded to, we're restricting local events at 800, and surprisingly, there are several in the fall that are asking for 1,000 and 1,200. Once we get to September, which we're crossing our fingers, they know we've already had the conversation with the clients. They fully understand and they appreciate the fact that we're trying to protect their service levels as well. But they're very anxious to hear from us once the fall rolls, once September gets here, to see if we can up their count.
Pat, can I ask you just a quick question?
Sure.
I'm having trouble reading this chart. The actual year to date for the economic impact, you have attendance for local 48,770,
That's correct, 48,000 people. 48,000.
48,000, but upon all the dollars, the only ones that are in the millions. Like the first one is 11,068,000.
Correct. Oh, yeah. Yes, that's in thousands, well, to millions, but that's in thousands. And then the others are actual. So you're right, it's 11 million economic impact, but the attendance numbers are in
Just the numbers.
gross number, correct?
Okay. Thanks, Pat.
Sure.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
No, good question.
Makes a little difference.
Yes, it does. And it is millions, not thousands. So guest satisfaction score, 4.8, the goal is 4.9. Had some great comments. In fact, I did have one event evaluation came back and the rating was a 4 instead of 5. Everything on it was a 5 except we got 1, 2. And I called the client and I said, gee, and she had made a note that there apparently were 2 servers who, she said were probably having a bad day and they weren't as positive as she had anticipated them to be. But out of the entire experience, that's what she focused on. So instead of a 5, she gave us a 2, which is fine. But it was good to hear that, it was not anything more serious than that. But she also was appreciative of the fact that we pay attention, that I do read all the event evaluations. We actually called to ask. So, but otherwise she was very, very pleased with the event, thought it was great. They already rebooked for next year. So. believe that help me out on this one, Anne Marie, on page 10, the green dots say 2019 APR. I thought it was occupancy. I believe the green dots, oh, it changed, sorry.
Yeah, I changed the percent.
Okay.
It was, yeah. it's-
Okay. Sorry, I'm looking at the original and we had talked about change. So anyway, the good news here is there's positive trends as noted in occupancies and ADR at $134. We just hadn't seen that before. Again, every month has been a record on that, but demand continue or the occupancy as a percentage is up. The demand actually is down by a few room nights. You'll see that on this slide. But again, overall, I mean, it's very close. It was like 300 room nights. So, basically, demand continues to be strong, based year on year, and again, even against last month down a bit, but that's the trend. So,
What are the hoteliers telling you about projections? Do they think this is going to keep up?
they do. In fact, I ran into Kathy Pigeon from the Riverside a week ago. Talked to John Cunningham and Vicky Carley. Actually, Vicky is the director of sales and marketing for their 3 hotels, the Hotel 43, the Grove, and the Courtyard. There's no, they don't see a blip in the future. Now, COVID could always, the recent stuff could always cause some commotion, but there's no one that I've talked to that's projected anything less than stellar. And
Still
again,
amazes me.
again, July, the hotels have cooperated, well with the conventions. And, I'll side note a little bit. Kristen and I have talked about this as we look at, potential strategic planning opportunities for us, and different projects if we add more space, and how many more conventions can we get by adding more space? And this is going to sound counterintuitive, but it's not. Getting more ballroom space, if we really get the Grove, the arena, or if we built something else. The hotels currently give us the maximum number of rooms they feel they can for a room block, which is sitting about 600. So while we have the potential space here, and this actually will lead on to one of the sales slides. We have the potential to do 2 500-person conventions because of East and West. We have collectively, we could do 1,000 or 1,200, as we've already shown. But to do that, you have to have 13 hotels. And the clients are not very willing to do that. That has to be a very special client, or clients. But the hotels are protecting their leisure demand, which I don't blame them. So we could probably get to about 700 or 800 if we, by using the Riverside and Park Center. But the challenge there is the willingness of those, particularly the Riverside, because of their sheer demand. They've developed a great clientele with reunions, particularly summertime, with staycations, with their expansion, with an indoor pool, on and on. So the value of added space to us is taking care of the larger local events, those that are 400, 500, 600, that particularly this in the springtime and the fall, the big gala seasons for fundraisers. We have clients fighting over dates. Allie and her team and the event team have done an outstanding job. Every week, there's a Monday meeting, and once a month, Allie and the sales team, the event team, we all sit in here and we go through the next 18 months and we start plugging holes. As you'll see on one of the next slides on the sales side, conventions for next year, we're about booked out for the how we can squeeze conventions in and still take care of the local events. So the added space that you hear me talk about isn't necessarily to drive more conventions, because I'm not sure we're going to be able to do it without a significantly large hotel. We've always needed an 800 to 1,000 room hotel, and in current market conditions, There's, in fact, it was just announced, there's two of Marriott brands are gonna go over here. Jared Smith is gonna build two right over here by the Hotel 43. Total of about 225 rooms, but it's two different hotel products. Shared lobby and shared bar space on one of the rooftops. There's a couple other smaller properties that are being built, one behind the Wahi Plaza. And then there's another one I've heard is looking at the market. So these are all select service, smaller size properties, which won't impact convention availability. So again, interesting conventional wisdom right now. The good news is, as a convention center serving the particular market that we are, I see long-term success for Boise and for the facility. It's the local events that have such high demand on the facility that trying to take care of both clients is our biggest challenge.
So what would a square foot minimum be to help alleviate some of those galas? Is it 8,000?
At least 30 to 40,000 in one space. The arena that we had years ago, when we had that analysis, there were two floors. One could get us about 28 and the other could get us about 30. It's just because of columns or, you know, if we didn't have to do columns, you got structural beams that can, but so, I mean, as long as we can serve, you know, our big ballroom can serve up to 1,200. And really that would be.
What's the total square foot of the ballroom?
25. So, you know, if we wanted to do a bigger festival of trees, right? A festival takes up that entire space and you can still get 1,200 for dinner. So at least 25, if not bigger, net use. So this is the slide I was talking about. So if you look, you know, total, if everything comes in as planned, we'll have 67 conventions this year. We're already looking at 69 next year. There's 18 tracking, so the chance of some of those falling out certainly exists, but then there's a chance also that others will fill in. So again, the good news is Boise is on the map, and you've heard me say that. You've heard that from the sales side. The trade show, I'm very excited for Cody to be able to go and see for himself what these trade shows look like. And, you know, Kristen, I mean, I know you've attended and, you know, plenty of those too. So it's exciting to see. And if you look 2 years out, we're already at 41. So we're reaching a saturation point for conventions in the facility while we try to balance the local events. I think if the board is going to hear any criticism from our constituents in the future, it's going to be there's not enough room at the end. Again, great, double-edged sword. You know, that 1 to 300 room night is still our bread and butter, and while we're able to get the bigger room night conventions, again, the challenge is hotel space and the willingness. And when I say that, again, absolutely zero criticism to the hoteliers. They're giving us, in fact, when I sat down with the CVB and our sales team a few weeks ago and asked them, you know, do I need to get involved? Do I need to sit down with the owners or the general managers, you know, the decision makers by giving up more rooms? And Andrew did a spreadsheet that said this is how many hotel rooms the properties have, and this is how many rooms they're willing to commit, particularly for specific conventions coming up over the next year. And as a head hotelier, I think the percentages that they're given to the room blocks is very fair. You know, a couple of the hotels are given room blocks, but their rates are the highest of anybody. But again, I don't want to get into rate structures. It's just the matter of fact is that most of the hotels are within a reasonable room block rate, whereas a couple of them choose to try to get the higher of the rates for the hotel or for the group. But again, this is going to continue to be about where we are, I think, as far as the vast majority of our conventions are going to be 1 to 300. And most of that 1 to 300 are close to 300, quite frankly. But to go to that 3 to 6, you know, we'll be able to grow that, I think. To some extent. I mean, right now you got 7 and 22 and 6 and 23. I think those numbers will continue to go up. But as a total, I don't know that we're going to see many more conventions than what we're already booking. Cody alluded to, we're trying to rate manage the convention. So, for instance, if a group has no food and beverage, and there's two specific ones that I'm thinking of. So if a group has no food and beverage, but they have a pretty good sizable attendance, which means they fill up, that they're renting hotel rooms. The economic impact to the district is through room night generation. But what's the better piece of business? A group that has food, beverage, that they're a full convention, food, beverage, and exhibits, as well as their meetings, that's the best. From a facility standpoint, do we want to take those groups that don't have food, beverage, and ancillary services versus those that just have room nights? Those are the internal decisions that we're facing. And those are the decisions we're making pretty much every day now. And so, quite frankly, we're looking at displacing some of those groups, that even though they have strong room night, if they don't have anything else for Boise Center, we're looking at saying no, because we think that there's a better convention that we can fit into that timeline. So again, those are challenges that we're facing. That's the management side that we're trying to weigh out. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any good decision. It's based on economics. So that it used to be where we just take anything and we had space for it. Now it's a lot of supply and demand, and how can we best do that while still taking care of the guests and providing the best customer service possible, both internally as well as extending that externally. It's all rhetorical. There's no magic answers, but again, just letting you know how we're trying to manage the facility.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. So I think the Fed raised the rates in May, and we talked about this. It was 0.5%, and they raised it 75 basis points just the other day. Because we have a fixed income portfolio, our portfolio value declined 61,000 in May in anticipation of the rate change. So we would expect that June wouldn't be that significant. We've had a $248,000 loss year to date. But the key thing here is that our goal is to hold the portfolio to maturity. So these are book losses, they're not actual losses. As long as we hold the investments to maturity, we won't experience a loss. And then our team from the financial side, Maria, who's our accounts payable and fixed assets specialist, and I went to Austin, Texas to the GFOA presentation. It was 4 days. So it's a Government Finance Officer Association. There's a lot of information about budgeting and accounting changes, cyber systems, IT, just very, very educational and very, very helpful for us. Combined revenues and expenses. Right now we're $1.8 million, better than budget. Obviously, almost $1 million of it's in the Boise Center, 848,000 of that variance is in the district. And those are as a result of better revenues than anticipated. And as Pat has said, we had a very aggressive budget going into the year, and we continue from a revenue perspective and a cost perspective to do better than budgets. You can see here our lodging tax revenues exceeded budget. So far, we've exceeded budget in 5 of the 6 months. We show a forecast here of 9 million. What that takes is our actual year-to-date of 4.1 and adds budget to it. But if you look at our rolling 12-month revenue, it's 9.7 million. So if our next 6 months meets last year, we could potentially end up over 9 million. And we're currently almost $1 million over budget on revenues, and our expenses are below budget due to timing. Again, same thing with the Boise Center. We've budgeted 8.1 million. Our forecast right now is 7.7 million. Our monthly revenues for the year, or for the month, we're over budget by 166,000. That $856,000 is one of our top 6 revenues in history. It's our number 2 revenue month for April, only behind 2019, and we're servicing those levels of revenues with about 20% less staff. And as Pat said, we continue to revenue manage the calendar to use what capacity we have to maximize our revenues. Regarding our financial highlights for the Boise Center, overall, it was a great month. Our revenues for the month were above budget by 5%, and that's even though we'd lost 104,000 in revenue due to COVID. And some of our events are running lower than forecasted, which of course we have no control over attendance. So that is another challenge for us. Record revenues for AV. In fact, I brought the financial statement because I thought it might help, or just as an interesting fact, was we talk about food and beverage is 50% of this, and I thought maybe you might be interested in knowing what percentages some of the others are. So for example, our room sales, which is our room rent, is at 20% of our revenue. Our AV is running about, just the equipment rentals, about 14%. And then we add in another 3% for service charge. So it puts it up to about 17%. So that's a big change for AV. Prior to COVID, AV was not that substantial a part of our revenue, but with all of the remote and hybrid events and the galas and all of the cool things we can do with lights and stuff, and our investment in the AV equipment, it's been a significant shift in our income statement. The other thing that liquor, beer, and wine's about another 11%. And then one of the other items, when I was looking in operations, it's our Wi-Fi, our internet. It has contributed to our revenues as well. And then our power supply of, providing power to, when we have events, to some of the booths, has contributed to just our other revenue, which has increased in general. We have talked about some of the rate increases that we have done for food, trying to control the costs, and our direct labor, despite our reliance on temporary services, has been on budget. Obviously, that will change with raising the beginning rates from $14 to $16. So we'll see probably that going over budget a little bit in the next 6 months. Our food costs, as a percentage of food revenue, have leveled out as well and are in line with budget for this month. One of your questions you were asking, Kristen, about the employee-related expenses. We did do a search for senior accountant position, and so we did end up paying a search fee for that. And it's just because we were unable in the accounting field, and it's tough. There's a lot of demand for finance people, and it's just hard to find good quality candidates that have the experience that we need. Our insurance is running above budget due to our increasing real estate values and costs, and that will continue to be above budget every year or every month, hopefully. One would like to see real estate values slow down a little bit, and our insurance costs might be a little more controlled. But And our loss of 441,000 is 25% below budget. So, and that carries through, if you look on the other side, year to date, our loss is 27% below budget. So we continue to have revenues that are running ahead of budget, our labor expenses under control, our direct costs are back in line. Just overall, not much there to, not many areas of concern. I mean, we're doing pretty darn good compared to budget. And then our square foot utilization, we continue to, in some cases, perform better than historical. And you can see we're continuing to fill in some months. We're our basically 90% increase over 2021. And 2023 continues to fill in nicely. Any questions?
For Pat or Anne Marie?
I just have one question, Madam Chair, for Anne Marie. Huge year, less cash. More cash?
Yes.
A lot more cash.
If we, let's see if I can go back to the first slide. Oh, one more. Come on.
Sure you're trying to.
It'd help if I'd hit the right button, sorry, I apologize. So if you look at the cash position of the slide up there, so that it says cash actual, our actual cash is 22,705,000. Our budget year to date for fiscal year end is 20 million. So we're 2.7 million better than budget right now in cash.
What about year end?
Well, I'm assuming that the 2.7 would continue to carry through to the end of year end, plus any additional increases that the tax revenues are over budget. So this would indicate that we would end up at the end of the year at 2.7, assuming we met budget for tax revenues.
Let me ask it another way.
Okay,
How much cash are we gonna have a year end?
That's my question, Joe.
20 million, well, 22. I'll have to look for you. I didn't have it on there. I'll have to get that answer for you, because that's not on there.
Because if we're forecasting it.
Yeah.
9.7.
We're currently
We're not
forecasting,
projecting 9.7.
we're
projecting
forecasting 9 million, but it could be as high as 9.7, and we're currently, let me just look at my spreadsheet and I'll email you the information.
Well, Hy and I are on the same page.
Well, and
If we're
I
gonna
will,
have record years, let's finish the year with more cash than we started.
we already, I understand, I'll add something to this so that it'll be there every month too.
Yeah.
We'll make it fit.
What's that, Hy?
Anne Marie, one question. Additional capital needs are 10 million. Is that half of what we've got?
I'm just,
Yes.
yeah.
And what are the additional capital needs?
Hi, I try to put that in every month to let the board know that over the next 3 years, there's going to be substantial projects that we have because of the aging building. And, you know, for instance, we have 6 million in there for the ceiling and the ballroom in West. There's another, at least 2 per year that we're gonna have in the budget. The purpose of that line item is to make sure that the board and the public knows that while we have $20 million in the bank, that there's a plan for that 20 million, that we're not just sitting on a bunch of cash and not doing anything with it. There's no plan for it. So it's a continuing heads up that while we have 20 million in the bank, that there are capital needs within the building. So
Can you break that out? when you get a chance, that 10 million, just like you did.
Sure.
That would be great. Something that you could send me in an email, because I won't remember all the things you said.
Sure.
I'm
No
just
problem.
curious.
Yeah, no problem. And one other point about the cash at the end of the year, while I understand where the board is interested in, the rest of the year is pure speculation. I mean, the good news is we've had record months. And as you all know me well enough, I tend to be conservative in how I look at the future. You know, and as Anne Marie said, if we hit budget, you know, if all the rest of the months hit budget, then, you know, we'll be about 9 million. And everything starts with a big IF. So, and Hi asked a great question. What do the hoteliers think of the future? Everybody thinks that the future is looking really bright. Well, I want to remind everyone that in February of 2020, we were on course to have a record year, both in room tax revenues as well as operational revenues. And then March 13th hit. And I think we know what happened after that. So while I have no problem, I mean, you're our boss and I recognize that, and we'll put together a what if for you, absolutely. But
That's all, make sure everybody gets a copy. That would be
But
great.
I just want to make sure that the best laid plans, I mean, you know, and
No.
rolling 12 says 9.7 million, which
Yeah.
that is going to change that cash position significantly, which I
That's why
appreciate.
there's a plan Z.
Well, again, I just, everything we do here is public and everything we put in print is public. And I don't want to, I just, as long as everybody understands that when we say this is forecast, that it's not going to the bank with it, that's all.
But if someone were to look at that spreadsheet and look at $10 million for, what was the line item again?
It's capital expenses.
Capital expenditures, which is half of what we've got, that person would just see 10 million. They wouldn't know what that 10 million represents. I mean, I agree that all the capital improvements need to be done. It's just, it would be nice if it were broken out.
Sure, happy to do it.
Great.
In fact, I'll ask Anne Marie to add another cell to that. And we'll break it out on the report as well. But yeah, I'll
I
definitely.
mean, it doesn't have to be today or tomorrow. Whenever you
No
get
worries.
around to it.
Easily done.
Thanks, Pat.
Sure.
Thanks, Anne Marie.
Oh, no,
Pat, do we have any information on what happens to our kind of trends for hotel rooms and conventions going into recessions? It's being speculated. Well, I guess it is happening now. Is there any trend that you've seen over your career that how much things typically drop off or how much, you know, the 800 person event pulls back to 550? Is there any information like that?
Maybe a little, and I can relate it back to the 2008 to 2011 recession that we had then. Traditionally, Boise, if you look before that, because I used to track hotel growth in the market and that sort of thing, right? So even currently, Boise traditionally will sort of roll along. We don't see the high peaks that the tier 1 cities normally saw, nor did we see the huge valleys that those similar cities would hit when a recession hit. We sort of would roll through. 2008, we took the elevator down like everybody else did, only we didn't go as far, but it was certainly significant. One of the things that we saw, we didn't lose any conventions during that time, which shocked me. There were some attendance numbers that were down a little bit, but we never lost any conventions, which I was shocked about. It was the local events that showed more of the impact. For instance, the realtors used to do, I mean, prior to that point, they'd fill the ballroom, they'd do 700 back then, 700, and they were still big events. They actually ended up 2 years in a row going to the Riverside because their numbers dropped so significantly that their attendance, it didn't make any sense for them to be here. They actually went to the river. They still had their event, but it was much smaller, much rolled back. Some of the galas we saw, you know, the numbers in the galas and some of the local banquets were down. And even if and in some cases, the attendance numbers were similar to prior years, but the amount of money raised at those was significantly less. I mean, this year, just this spring, we've had at least 2 events that raised over $1 million for those events in one night, which was kind of fun to watch how that was happening. Or listen to it as I was doing dishes in the back. So, but to answer your question, I mean, so we didn't lose any conventions. Not to say that this pending economic impact we're going through may or may not. But again, for that one that I was actually here for and we were paying attention, it was the local events, it wasn't the conventions, which was a shock. But and I can go back and take a look at those 3 years and just do a real high level. Here's how many conventions we had, how many local events, and just as a point of reference, I guess, if that would be of interest.
Does leisure travel drop off during that time too? I mean, gas is higher.
Well, if you look at the room tax revenues dropped. I mean, we were going like this, right? 2007 was a record. Thank you, Henry. 2007 was a record, and then 8, 9 dropped, 10 was flat, and then we bounced back. And as you can see, you know, we didn't look back until COVID. So yes, it does. Yes. That's an
helps
easy
a
one to
lot.
answer
Yeah.
now.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions?
I'd move approved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Lots of good discussion.
Yeah. On to other business, right?
Madam Chair, Board, thanks for having me back. Couple updates, information for you today, just kind of give you a progress update. Want to talk a little bit about the financials, where things are at. And obviously answer any questions you guys might have. As Pat had mentioned, if anybody wants to go out and look at the site, you can obviously drive by any time, but if someone wants to walk around and kind of get the grand tour, just let us know and we'll make arrangements with CM to get out there and be able to walk around the property. It's pretty neat to see what's going on out there. I just put a couple slides, the bottom right actually being taken today. So you can see where they've got the start of the sprung structure going up. They always start with the core, kind of those first 3 arches. They have since filled both layers of the building. So the outer Tedlar layer and the inner, and then it's filled with insulation. And then you'll see on the bottom right picture the cranes. So the cranes are back on site, which means they're going to start hoisting the next beams consecutively. I'm not sure how much they'll place up before they put in the next layers of the actual fabric building. So it's pretty neat to see it going up. Just a lot of action going on out there. Everything else, but they're so far on time and really little to no issues. Our pool fabrication is ahead of schedule. It's actually on the boat on the way over here, expected to hit the Long Beach Pier sometime in early July, which means it'll be on site in Boise by the end of July, which is exciting. The expectation is that once that building is about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way done, then that's when the pool installer, CEM Aquatics, will start moving in and digging holes to put the pool in. So exciting to see it all come together. Financial wise, I know we've kind of been giving you updates as we go, but I wanted to kind of rehash kind of where we started and where we're at now with everyone. Obviously, given the state of the economy and state of supply and state of labor, things have shifted quite a bit. So this is kind of what we call the district portion of the budget looked like back in September when we finalized the purchase of the sprung structure, and how that was gonna look and the different components, essentially trying to come in right at that $5 million number that you guys had allocated for us for this project. Fast forward to today, and things have changed quite a bit. And some of it not necessarily unexpectedly, I guess, given the state of things. The large numbers that you're gonna see there that are of significance are probably one is installation, that's purely labor. We had an expectation based on the cost or price of kind of a per man hour, that the cost of erecting the structure is gonna be about 300,000, and right now it's 756 is what they're projecting. It's just purely just the availability of people and trying to get them on site and what they have to pay to have bodies on site to do the work. The other large one obviously is the HVAC, and we spent a significant amount of time trying to figure out ways to make that more cost effective. At the end of the day, we had bids that kind of stretch across the spectrum, including as high as 2.8 billion. So we came in at 2.1. We actually brought in an outside engineer from Salt Lake that had worked on the Kearns pool that Pat and Cody had a chance to tour. And they did a full review of our mechanical engineering plans and took a look at everything. And we were able to pair off a few items, but at the end of the day, it's just the cost is just that much more significant for HVAC than it was, even a year ago. So that was a pretty significant hit to the overall budget on the buildings.
Madam Chair, can I ask you just one quick question?
You bet.
How do you go from 750,000 as a projection to 2,150,000?
That's the same question we are asking, trust me. The 750,000 was based on the cost that it took to do an HVAC system in the Kearns pool, which is a fabric structured, sprung structure over at Aquatic Center in Salt Lake City. The cost of that project there was actually a $500,000 HVAC system. It was 6 or 7 years ago, so we knew there'd be an incremental increase. We do have a larger building, so we put that into the number at 750. Even CM Company was expecting this to be less than $1 million. Everyone was in kind of shock when they got back to that number at 2.1. So
I still don't understand. How did you go from 750,000 to 2 million? Was it the contractor or was it your projection?
I think it was all of our projections, not just my projection, but also the CM. So I think the contractor's projection as well. And at this point, essentially the cost of a lot of that cost, they've kind of broken down into components for us. One was the cost of actually getting the components, which are not easy to come by at this point, just because of supply. And the other is the cost of the outside material that runs from the HVAC system into the building, because the HVAC system will sit outside. And so the cost of that ducting at this point in time is just extraordinarily expensive. Those are things that we just obviously couldn't account for back in September that we're seeing across the board.
So the CM company go out and ask for bids for these HVAC systems from local companies, regional companies, and say,
Correct.
here's the specs, what would it cost? And then people submit bids. Is that how that works?
Yep, and it ranged from, we have one bid for 2.1, one for 2.4, and one for 2.8.
I mean, that's currently.
Correct.
Do you do an RFP when in 9/1/2021?
No, RFP wasn't done at that point. That was based on our work with CM and trying to figure out what the anticipated cost would be based on how the building was designed.
So you're asking us for another $2 million.
Well, I'd like to go through a few more slides and then get your take on how all that might fit together. But
Sure.
at the end of the day,
So question about
Yeah.
the labor, you mentioned something about that's where we are now at that 76. Do you anticipate that changing at all? Or is that what it is?
that's the current labor market. I don't have an answer for that. I think we've got to wait and see what happens if the labor market comes down and cools and allows more people to be on site. Essentially, the way the building is put together is Sprung itself doesn't bring bodies, the main contractor. So in this case, CM provides the bodies to do the work. And so they've reached out to a number of contractors to, bring in, people that would help put that together. In fact, they've been able to do it a little bit cheaper than if they used purely like an employer or employee company that just provides basic employees. they're actually able to get bodies from other contractors. But to answer your question more succinctly, the budget was expected that this would cost $30 to $35 per hour per man. And the 756 is based on $75 per hour per man for the same work.
So there is still some work to be done. It sounds like you're not anticipating it going above the 756, but potentially being less.
That's the hope, correct? Yes. But CM feels that 756 is they've budgeted, I guess, aggressively or conservatively, whichever you want to look at it, to assume that number wouldn't climb higher.
And then I guess the other, like the HVAC system, is that a done deal? You don't anticipate that very, changing?
Correct. Full RFP was done and bid and signed off on, so that should not increase.
And what's in the overhead?
Sorry, what was that?
What's included in overhead?
Oh, overhead, it would be the like CM's related management costs, right? So it's insurance and builder's risk and liability and those things associated with the construction specifically of the building.
I'm assuming concrete footings is just the cost of materials, and that probably isn't going to change much. The sprung building being slightly higher is due to?
Just very small modifications, increase in the number of openings to the building that we had originally planned. The city required us to do a second full exit on both sides. So just those additional costs change the makeup of the building itself and increase the cost.
So it looks like installation might be the only thing that could be still a tad flexible.
Correct. So just because Pat and I had talked about the CSL report that was done and the warning that we've kind of kept in the back of our pocket, and I reread it this morning and thought I would share because it certainly has come true, right? The risk that we've got in this project is just related to construction costs. And I just kind of highlighted the portions there that certainly have become applicable to us. CSL was wise enough to see that coming, and obviously we wish we had been able to foresee it a little bit better as well, but here we are. This is really the overall budget. So I wanted to kind of share, not just the district portion, but the whole piece. And I tried to, put these pretty broad buckets, but land obviously is self-explanatory. The pools themselves, that's the cost of the pools and installation of it. The building is just specifically the sprung building itself. And then construction is really everything that it takes to get all that accomplished. And so that includes obviously all the other underlying components that would go into the process, including, for example, HVAC, all those things fit into that construction bucket. So
Just one quick one.
Yeah.
Of the 6,875,000, how much have you raised?
which you're looking at the original on the bottom down there. We've got, let me give you the exact number. So to date, we have procured 8.8 million.
You have 8.8 million.
Sorry, that includes the district's dollars. I apologize. So we have 8.8. To make sure I'm thinking through that correctly.
I'm confused now. You need
Yeah.
2 more million from us, and you have $1.8 million more than you.
We're $5 million short. So if we look at if we look at the June column where we've got 18.8 is the total. And the district's put in 5, and we are accounting for 13.8. Yeah, that's correct. So we have put in 8.8, or we have 8.8 pieced together.
But you have 8 million in the bank. That's your
That-
money.
It includes our financing package, yes.
What does that mean?
Means ICCU is our bank has committed to finance a portion of the project for us.
So it's fundraising and loan.
Correct. These are all funds that we've procured to get.
I'm sorry, you're projecting them? The 8 million is a projection,
That's the total that we've secured,
secured,
correct?
and it's in the bank.
But we're not going to draw off the money from ICCU until it's required. So because essentially would be treated as a construction loan.
Well, I'm confused. So you don't have any skin in the game yet.
but we have 3.8 million in,
You do.
and we'll have the financing package as well. That's what falls on us as well.
So I guess that's where you're going with the percentage of
Percentage of
investment.
responsibility of the project.
Percentage, yeah, and so initially it was around 50-50, well, a little less. And now it's gonna be closer to the 27-73.
And
So you're
so,
taking on a larger percentage of the cost of getting the project done.
correct.
So
So
at this point, you were projecting 13 million, you weren't projecting the 6. So is that the 5 million you're talking about?
yeah, when we first were putting this together, we were projecting that our group would put together roughly 6.9, the district would have their 5. And we've kept the district's number obviously at 5 throughout the project, despite the growing costs, and been committed to put together the rest of those funds.
All right, thanks.
You bet. And so full circle back to your question, I guess what we'd like to talk to the district about is a slight rebalance, not back to the original percentage, of course, but to see if the district's willing to put some additional funds in to help us bridge that last gap.
Now, with any additional money that we would or would not put in, you would pay the 5%, right?
Right.
If you put in more. And if we don't put in the money, what happens?
We'll continue to work on raising the funds through naming rights and whatnot. We've been working on that kind of relentlessly on a number of leads, and been in a number of negotiations with various parties to work on naming rights and fundraising, and we'll just kind of continue to work on that. At the end of the day, we'll obviously at some point, if we don't have the funds, we'll tell CM to pause until we can finalize.
So it could
fundraising
impact
report.
construction timeline.
What's that, sorry?
Could impact construction timeline. Do you know how far you'll be able to get out with the money that you have?
Best guess at this point would be end of July.
And the current timeline, if you had all the money you needed for the project, when would you be finished?
February.
So any delays is pushing it really into spring.
Correct.
And you've got those 2 committed events that are in Win.
We've got a vet committed July and then in August, both of 2023.
Do you have a projected annual income once you're up and running?
We do. So we've got a couple slides there to share. One is, this is cut out of that CSL study. Just wanted to kind of illustrate where we were at originally with those numbers, because obviously we've had to take a harder look at those as we've looked at different financing options. So I've highlighted a couple columns. One is what CSL has identified as kind of a typical private facility, which typically operates at about $500,000 of income, about $10,000 of income per square foot. Our initial conservative, extremely conservative estimates put us at just 160,000 net income and $4 per square foot of revenue. We have worked with a company called Isaac Sports Group out of Michigan that does a long history of doing consulting with facilities such as ours and programming and financial modeling. And they really kind of are open our eyes to a lot of things as we kind of work through these numbers. And so this is our current projection. So you can kind of see our initial model as an example showed that we are only doing 5 lessons per day, not 5 groups of lessons, not 5 hours, but literally just teaching 5 people per lesson, or excuse me, 5 people per day, which obviously for a facility is insane, right? If anybody's walked into a swim lesson or walked into the YMCA for an hour and you look down the pool and you're going to see 40 or 50 kids taking a swim lesson, and every half hour it's a new 40 or 50 kids. So that was one item that they really kind of worked on us with, this building a more appropriate lesson program. And so the current, this current model actually shows the right number for you. This one will show essentially 70 individual lessons per day, or just 15 lessons essentially per hour. So you have, we've got a pool the size of what you might see at the downtown Y, a 25-yard pool with only 15 kids in it is still a pretty sparse pool. So in Isaac Sports Group's view, that's still an incredibly conservative number to just use 70 individual lessons per day. Another great example would be the lane rental revenue. When we did that initial model, we were just targeting essentially the lowest rental revenue we could find to make our budget break even. Market in the valley is somewhere between $20 and $25. These revised numbers show $20 an hour. Our original was 14. So we've just bumped up our rental to 20, still showing a conservative number because it's still essentially below market. There isn't a lot to gauge on market other than a few facilities that will rent. I mean, the Y rents sparingly to a few club teams. There are a few gyms in town that rent space, but there isn't a huge water rental market in town. National averages are somewhere between $25 and $30 an hour. So our revised budget, again, being really conservative at $20 an hour per lane. And the last one, again, daily users. You know, our original budget was showing really that we would only have about 5 to 10 kind of walk-in users on a daily basis. Again, anyone that's been to the Y knows that you're going to have a lot more of those on a regular recurring basis, especially as you start to build, you know, a membership base or whatnot. So Isaac Sports Group asked us to put in roughly 8 to 15 daily users depending on the time of the year. So those are kind of the three core numbers that we've increased on the revenue side to make sure that we've got adequate funding. And you'll find that that number through the first 3 years is essentially in line with what, in fact, if not, you know, possibly below what CSL had projected for a private facility. The expense lines we've obviously adjusted as well. One being the occupancy number. If we were to get additional commitment from the district, that obviously increases our rent. So I've added those additional numbers into our occupancy number as a rent expense. And then I've also included a full debt service amount, principal and interest down in the bottom section to account essentially for what would be our net cash flow. So, you know, bottom line is our numbers at this point are still conservative and still less than the $10 per square footage that CSL projects for a normal private facility.
So on the expenses, that includes the occupancy, is it at 7 million versus the 5?
Correct.
Okay. And then did you also adjust for, you know, costs with potential, you know, pool maintenance and staffing with the cost of labor and the cost of supplies? Have you changed?
Correct. All that stuff's been modified to be closer to what market is.
Madam Chair,
Mhm.
so what's the, have you raised the debt service and capital reserves based on an additional 2 million?
The additional 2 million is sitting in the occupancy number because it's a rent expense. So I've increased that expense line to account for paying rent on an additional 2 million.
And then your debt service is your loan to
Correct.
ICCU.
Correct.
That's 5 million or
Correct.
somewhere around there. The loan is roughly 5 million. The debt service number down below is a $5 million loan.
But if we add the 2 million to it,
It's
Sorry,
different.
that's
It's different. So our investment would be in the occupancy line. The loan that they have from ICCU is in the debt service line.
yeah,
So he's accounted for a $7 million occupancy number, 5% of that in this adjusted number. Correct? Did I get that right?
Correct.
But there's more in occupancy than just our payment, right?
Yes, that's you know, utilities and other
50,000
related.
or- Okay.
So especially with Jim being not here today, I don't want to take a vote on this today. I'll have Jim contact you individually so that you can give him the information.
Yeah, obviously happy to answer any question from anyone if they want to reach out after the meeting. meeting.
So I say we put this on the agenda for the July meeting, but certainly please ask as many questions as you have today. And then if there's anything that, you're home thinking about and you're, gosh, gee, I would like a number on this or whatever, just let us know and we can get you that information. Do you have any more slides that you, more information you will have?
That's all I have.
So what do you do if you have to come back to us again? Given the volatility of everything that you're talking about, do you have a plan B?
Our costs are pretty much locked in at this point because everything's actually gone to bid and been signed off on by CM Company. So we don't have any outstanding items out there at this point that hasn't been bid to an individual contractor and finalized. So, the conversation we have with CM is that we don't expect these expenses to go any further than where they're at. They seem
Potentially
pretty
with
hard,
a slight reduction in labor.
correct? And, obviously, we're continuing to work the naming rights, continuing to work sponsorships, continuing to work donations. We want to continue to work on those, even once we've secured all the cash, we still think there's a great value in that, dissimilar to the hockey arena or Boise State, all those sorts of things. Those are obviously great sources of revenue and opportunities to buy down related debt that we'd rather not have on our balance sheet. So those are things we're going to continue to work on with cash in hand or not.
Madam Chair, I have a question for Michael. Can we do that? Can we sell the naming rights? Being a
Director
state
Clark,
organization.
Madam Chair, well, yes, and one, we can sell the rights. So a couple of good things, because we haven't borrowed any money for this facility. We don't have IRS and other restrictions we would otherwise have in terms of selling naming rights. So that's actually a handy thing, because you don't want to know the joy we have with selling the naming rights for like Boise State's facility. So that's great fun. But anyways, we don't have to deal with that here. And second, because we have leased the facility to ICA, ICA is effectively selling their I guess leasehold interest naming rights, if you look at it that way, to the facility. So we the district or center are not technically selling the naming rights.
Thanks. I know once we get into the state bureaucracy, it's tricky.
Yes.
So have all permitting fees been paid, all things have been,
We have, hopefully, one more bill to see. To date, we've spent $370,000 on permit fees. We have one more permit that is actually specific to the pool that I anticipate being about $12,000 to $13,000. So all in, we're gonna end up at about $385,000.
and there shouldn't be any other surprise expenses from here on out.
Correct.
What kind of interest are we making on the 2 million that we would have there? No, not for this. Like, what do we have that we're getting from the bank account?
It's like
30 basis points.
4.7% less than.
Yeah, it's weird. One interest rate goes up really high and the other one just kind of stays the same.
So, Madam Chair, can I just
Yep.
ask just to clarify, to make certain I've got, if I end up having to draft something at some point, but so the four, whatever the number is, probably 2024 is an easier number. So the 462, that effectively anticipates, if we were at 7 million, that'd be whatever, 350-ish. If we're 5%, I can't remember if we have an increase, but, and then the 112,000 is your occupancy cost, is that, I mean, the utilities and stuff, is that
Correct.
okay?
Correct.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
if I might, I represented the board during the negotiations of this deal. And I spent at least 20 hours in Pat's office with Ryan Ryan and three of his partners and advisors and Mike and Pat. And I became convinced, and we felt like we were generous from our standpoint. I mean, most notably, there's no rent increase for the life of the deal. And they were accommodating in all of this, you can see. And I came out of that process, and it was a gut punch when I heard about this, because the whole, just like you and you, the whole time, we thought Jim came up with the $5 million number, and it was more than enough. And everyone said it's more than enough. So when you accept the fact it's not,
I didn't say that.
well, I did. But what I want to tell my fellow board members is we are partners, and they are honorable partners. There is nothing deliberate or nefarious or illogical about where we find ourselves. So I agree we need a month for each of us to dive in as much as we choose to, and we'll be ready next month.
So the way that the deal will be structured, 5 million is structured at X%. The 2 million will be repaid at a different percent, same percent. So we packaged it all at 7 million.
Yeah.
And we're charging them how much? 5%.
So it would just start when we would turn over the 2 million to you, start paying the additional money up rent for that.
Yeah, so currently the way it's structured now is we pay rent monthly on the land purchase. And the way the lease is drawn up is that the rent on the balance begins once the doors open. If I recall that correctly.
I believe that's correct. Once you have a seat, yeah.
Once we have
the
the
occupancy,
occupancy.
right. I mean, you may, well, I guess you'll have less than some meetings, so yes.
But my
So
last,
if we don't give you the 2 million, we delay your opening, we delay us getting rent. Additional rent.
but my last statement will be that if Jody thinks it's a good deal, I'll go along with it.
No pressure.
No pressure.
He's gonna sign the check at the end for the difference.
Well,
Well, we got into this deal because the board now unanimously wants to do things. And this is a great project. Everything Jim said about it at the time. And it was a reasonable mutual mistake.
yeah, I mean, we knew with the CSL, I'm glad you mentioned that, the CSL report did say that that was the potential, pitfall. I don't think any of us could anticipate it to the degree that supply chain has affected things and labor and inflation and all that stuff. So, I mean, it's not unreasonable to see the costs going up. I think that by the amount is shocking. But it's where we are, so.
Thanks.
Well, thank you guys. And just as on a positive, I spent the last weekend in Missoula at a swim meet, no less. And, swim meet of 700 kids and families. And I was telling Pat, the cost of hotel rooms that weekend were somewhere between $300 and $400 a night, just from a demand perspective. And these families don't have any problem paying the bill. They want to be there. They want to come to these events. The excitement for our facility is really building. There are a lot of teams out there that are excited to come to Boise and experience the facility. So we're excited. We know there's obviously work to be done and got to get it finished first, but there is a lot of excitement, and I'm confident that we're going to see the impact that's been projected. So appreciate everyone's continued willingness to work with us. We're excited about it.
Thanks. And chew on this. We'll let you know if there's any other information that anybody requests, and we'll see you back here in July.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, Pat, Convention Sports and Leisure.
Madam Chair, members of the board, the next two ought to be pretty easy ones. Convention Sports and Leisure has done several research projects for us in the past. The last was 2012, they did an update. And CSL, as they did for the Aquatic Center, Ed Pilkerton, my predecessor, we started working with John Cotts back in 1990, the late 90s. So been with John a long time. Anyway, we haven't had any updates done to the CSL report that, market analysis and that sort of thing. And as Chris and I were talking about, again, if the board decides to get into future projects and we have more space, what does that do for convention, that sort of thing. If we wanted to have CSL do an updated report or not. And again, pretty straightforward, just if the board is interested in having an update done, basically it's not even an update, it would be a whole new report. It's between $50,000, $60,000 to do that, that's about typical. I mean, it's expensive, but it's pretty typical. And, with us looking to do a strategic planning process, which is the next topic, I just didn't know if the board was interested in having CSL do a new report or not. If the board would find a value in that and having that available to them, given what we know.
Can we circulate the last one?
Sure.
I'd like to go through that
Here.
first to see.
I have it. You can take a look and after having looked at this, I think there's a fair amount that we don't need to update, or, it's kind of like, well, it is what it is. So I don't know if there's a way to do like a not full-blown version, and maybe a more targeted version. Maybe there's a way to look at that, after the strategic plan, if there's something that, I don't know. I'd love to get everybody else's opinion on it too, but I kind of saw some of the stuff in there. I'm like, some of that stuff we can pull, some of the stuff the CVB can pull. I think that we're kind of limited on what we can and can't do at this point in time. So I'm not sure, I don't know. I'd like to get everybody's opinion on it, but I just don't know if doing a full-blown study is worth it.
When we did this study, we were basing it on the expansion. And the expansion was something that was critical. We had to move on that. But is it critical to do it now, to do a new report? Because we don't have anything in the works other than the swimming location.
Well, and that's sort of the rhetorical question for you, Hi, is, as Kristen suggests, do you want to go through the strategic planning meeting and so it comes out of that and then decide if it's worthwhile. I talked to John Cotts, obviously a few weeks ago about this, and he's planning to be in Phoenix for IAVM for Venue Connect as I am, and I can sit down and chat with him while we're there. Again, there's no there really is no pressure to do it. It's simply, would the board find a value if we, again, without a project, and quite frankly, I think that some of at least one of the answers are going to come back to expand on a convention center to get more conventions. We need a big hotel.
Yeah.
And so if the goal of the district is to add more convention space without a big hotel, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And that's basically what the report's going to tell us. I mean, at least one component will tell us. I mean, we might get a little bit more granular on, if we want to do more local events, how much, what square footage does that look like? If we want to move forward, if the board decides they want to move forward on an indoor multi-purpose sports facility, we might target more on that. If again, we come out of and y'all know that's been a topic that I've presented to the board a few times over the last couple of years. So if the board sees a value in that and moving forward, again, we don't have the property. Everything has a big what if, what have, if land becomes available at the fairgrounds, or if we, find property somewhere else, which is getting more difficult. So again, is it the chicken or the egg thing? I don't know. In talking with Kristen, it's like, I'll throw it out there and see what you all,
It was
Madam
super
Chair,
helpful to look through the old one.
I'm not prepared to support
Yeah,
this at this time.
because I think the timeline
I am
is.
more than happy if the chair and the rest of the board are in, I'm in, but I'm not now.
I think the timeline, it wouldn't, even if we said yes today, it wouldn't be done in time for the strategic planning session anyway. And so that's where my thought is, okay, I don't think it's really beneficial to do this at this time without doing the strategic planning first to see what our focus may be, to see if there's a certain project that we may want to target, and then do a more pared down version, because this really covers everything, including, gosh, they interviewed past clients, they look at the air travel, they look at the hotels and we kind of know, well, we don't have a big enough hotel and we have less meeting space than other cities of our general size. So I don't think any of that's a shock. So that's where it's like, I'm not sure doing just a general study would be beneficial. I think that maybe doing strategic planning first, finding if there is a certain project or type of projects that we want to pursue, then maybe we could ask them to dive into that a little deeper. That's my general thought after having.
I'll
taken a
second
look at
that.
okay, well, wait, like I said, it was a topic conversation. And Chris and I both thought it was at least worth.
But I do think that that study would be really helpful for the rest of the board to take a look at prior to our strategic planning meeting in August sometime. So that you have at least an idea of what the stats are. I don't know, Jody, if you want to take a peek at it.
Not right now. Thank you.
Yeah. And you've probably already seen it, so,
A number of them.
yeah.
I'll just forward a copy to everybody and you take a look at it at leisure. So
Yeah.
the last.
Yeah.
The last one, the strategic planning consultant. The action item for the board today is approving me to sign the agreement with Connie Miller. I had a meeting that introduced Connie to Mike and Kristen. We talked about qualifications and they were comfortable with it. I don't want to speak for them at all. They can certainly speak for themselves, but it's $5,000 plus any direct costs, which again is standard. I know that Hi and Kristen were part of the 2017 effort to try to do the strategic planning, and then the consultant became ill, and then by the time we got around to it again, and I think Jody, you were part of the 2019, early 2020 when we were hiring the other consultant who was a BSU prof, and then COVID hit. She relocated to Arizona, so that's how we ended up with Connie. So long story short, the ask is for your permission to sign the contract or the agreement, and I'd like to set the date. I sent an email out. I didn't get everybody's response, but it sounded like August 16th was a positive response. The 17th is an option. 16th works the best for Connie and internally, but
Well, we know we have to do a strategic plan, but how does Connie come recommended? I mean, I know Connie, and I think she'd be great.
I had a reference on from a couple of folks who know her. Patty Perkins knows her and gave her a recommendation. Anne Marie had access to information on her as well. So I checked her out. I checked Patty in fact, she recommended Patty before she realized that I knew who Patty Perkins was. And
What's the timeline on this?
August 16th or 17th, preferably 16th. And we're thinking 8 to maybe 1-ish. So, work 8 to noon to do it, and then have a working lunch to wrap it up, so that it doesn't take a whole day out of the board schedule. In the meantime, she would spend July and August reaching out to each of the board members, having a meeting either, however you all want to do that, via phone call or Zoom or Teams or in person, which would be the preference. But so that, when the board convened on the 16th, that all the Q&A is done. She really presents fundamental summaries, make sure that there's consensus on the board, or go through whatever the dialogue or discussion the board needs to come to consensus. And basically, it's an update of the 2012 report, the SWOT analysis. I don't think there's a whole lot to, we can help her with the update on the SWOT analysis if there's, and then if you all feel that there's other things that we missed, but again, we do a SWOT analysis every year for the marketing plan. The marketing plan is going to reflect very closely to what we see here. So
Well, one of the things she looks at is the city and what's happening with the city, how we fit into that, or,
We talked about partners and who, we kind of already prepped her and said, some of these things we can't do on our own. So we have certain partners, but depending on what projects we have, so she's going to look at all of that.
I'm also thinking about the forecasting where the city's gonna be. If we take on a project, or we take on a project that may not make it because of the projection of the city, of where Boise is going. Because I can't think of any project that we take on that's gonna be less than 2 or 3 years. I'm just wondering if she would look at that.
I guess we could, and again, as part of the one-on-one with her, you could specifically, you could tell her what you were looking for and the expectation. I mean, again, the biggest landmass available right now is Expo Idaho. And, not to say that there aren't other options for sure. So one of the developers out around 10 Mile, I had reached out and said, hey, we've got 20 acres out there with the district, want to do something. I said, well, what's something? And we haven't met. I mean, it was just I saw the developer on the plaza one day and it was a brief conversation. He said, I'll reach out to you, and I haven't heard from him.
But we couldn't build out there, could we?
Well, I think it may depend. I don't know the exact answer to that. Again, very high level, quick question, Q&A, but certainly within the district boundaries, you have some land in the South Boise area, certainly that's available. You have certainly the Expo Idaho. I don't know all of them, but again, it depends on what the board sees as a viable opportunity. We've gone out, and again, it's sort of chicken or the egg. I mean, we've gone out to try to solicit some projects. There are others that, as the board knows, they come to us because we don't know everything and who's doing what. So, this is where board member Perkins might, be of some benefit as to availability and that kind of thing. So
I have a good idea.
So anyway, I think all of that is things that we can vet out to the best of our ability, what we know today.
I mean, the goal is to do as much pre-work as possible between now and August so that the time in August is really productive and we maximize our time together there. And then she has somebody who would be attending with her to take notes and help write the report afterwards. So she sounds like she knows what she's doing. She's been in the community for a long time.
Well, again, I know Connie, you know Connie, and she'd be good.
Madam Chair, I'd move approval and it's on my calendar.
Great. Do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. I'll take care of that.
Perfect. All right, seeing no other business before the board.
I move that we adjourn.
Second. Adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.